Relationships, right. They can be amazing and supportive, but sometimes things get complicated. Like when someone's asking for help, but their way of doing it just feels dangerous. Today we're going to look at this Reddit post where somebody's dealing with some really concerning behavior from their fiance.
Sounds intense.
It is. It comes from the subreddit, Warwood Dudo.
Oh, I've seen some crazy stuff on that subreddit.
Yeah, and this one definitely got a lot of attention. I think it brings up some really important points about relationships, manipulation, and like where do you draw the line with personal responsibility?
Absolutely. Those are definitely things we're going to want to unpack.
So the person who posted is asking for advice because she got into an argument with her fiance. Things escalated quickly, and he actually threatened to hit her.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, totally understandably, she got scared and started packing to take her kids to her mom's place to be safe.
Okay, so she's prioritizing safety for herself and her kids. That's a good first step.
Right. It's not always easy to do in those moments. But here's where it gets complicated. As she's leaving, she hears him groaning and realizes that he's cutting himself.
Oh, no.
She freaks out, grabs the knife from him, and ends up getting cut herself in the process.
This is where you start to see that trauma bonding thing happen.
Trauma bonding.
Yeah, it's like a psychological response to abuse where you feel this intense connection to the person who's hurting you. It's often fueled by these cycles of fear, manipulation, and like little bits of positive reinforcement sprinkled in. Have you ever been in a relationship that you knew wasn't good for you, but you just couldn't seem to get out of it?
I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah, that push and pull is often what's going on in these situations.
And the Reddit community is definitely weighing in. A ton of the responses are basically telling her to get out, like now. Safety first.
People on Reddit are pretty good at spotting manipulation, aren't they? They're seeing that what the fiancé is doing is all about control. He's making her responsible for his well-being and trying to keep people from leaving.
Some of those responses are pretty blunt, to say the least. I mean, one person writes, never interrupt the enemy when he's making a mistake.
Ooh, that's harsh.
Right. And then there's another one that just says, let him bleed. And then there's this gem, give him a bigger knife, pack all your stuff, and leave ASOB.
Well, they're certainly getting the point across, even if it's not very delicate. I think what they're trying to do is shock her into action. Like, this is serious. Your safety and the safety of your kids, that has to come first.
Yeah, there's a real urgency in those responses, like a whole bunch of internet strangers doing an intervention saying, you deserve better than this.
There's something powerful about that collective voice, especially when you're feeling isolated and trapped. It's validation. It's a reminder that you're not alone.
What's interesting is how many different suggestions people are giving. Some are saying to call 911 for a psych evaluation. Others are saying to get family and friends involved for support. And then some are just straight up calling out the fiance's manipulation tactics.
That's what I love about Reddit. You get this crazy mix of perspectives. Some are more helpful than others, but it gives the person posting a chance to see things from all different angles. It's like crowdsourcing wisdom or like a really chaotic support group.
Yeah. One comment that really stood out to me recommended a book called Why Does He Do That? By Lundy Bancroft. The person even linked to a free PDF. It's like they're handing her a lifeline saying, here's something that can help you understand what's happening.
Knowledge is power, right? Understanding how abuse works can be a huge step towards breaking free from it. By learning about those patterns, the original poster can start to see things more clearly and make some decisions about her future.
It's like giving her back some of the power she's lost.
Exactly. I think that's something we can all learn from this deep dive. We should pay attention to our own patterns in relationships, whether we're the ones behaving in unhealthy ways or on the receiving end.
And that brings us to a question for all of you listening. What would you say to a friend if they were in this situation? What resources would you recommend?
This whole discussion is about a very specific situation, but I think we can all apply these insights to our own lives, even if things aren't quite as extreme. Think about it. What are some red flags you've seen in your own relationships? How have you dealt with them?
It's pretty intense stuff we've been talking about, this whole Reddit post and everything. But I keep thinking about how all those people commenting, they were picking up on something that maybe the original poster didn't even realize herself, like this pattern in her fiance's behavior. It's like they were putting together a puzzle, all those red flags.
It is kind of like that, isn't it? You see all those actions that seem so impulsive, but actually they fit a classic pattern of abuse. Sadly, it's like a script that plays out in way too many relationships.
So what does that script actually look like? Like, what are the elements?
Well, you can think of it as a cycle, like a repeating pattern. It has a few different phases. First, you have the tension building up. Remember the original poster mentioned her fiance had been drinking a lot, like withdrawing from family stuff? That creates this volatile atmosphere, kind of like a pressure cooker.
And then, boom, the explosion. In this case, it's the threat of violence. Those words, I want to hit you, that's chilling. And it's definitely a turning point where things could escalate.
Yeah, for sure. And right after that comes what you might think is the honeymoon phase, but not in a good way. It's not about genuine apologies or promises to change. It's about self-harm instead.
So it's like he's using his own pain, his distress, to keep her trapped.
Exactly. It takes the focus away from his abusive behavior and makes her feel like the bad guy for wanting to leave.
Mhm.
It preys on her compassion and guilt, makes her responsible for his well-being.
It's so twisted because she's got this genuine concern for him,
Hmm.
wants to make sure he's safe, but at the same time, it's so obviously a manipulation tactic.
That's exactly it. And the tricky part is, if she gives in, it just reinforces that pattern. It teaches him that this tactic works to get what he wants, to control her.
So what can someone do if they're in this kind of situation? What's the first step to breaking that cycle?
Awareness. That's key. You got to recognize that pattern for what it is. It's manipulation. It's not a genuine cry for help.
Yeah, a lot of those Reddit folks were saying the next step is getting out, putting safety first, finding support. All that sounds good, but it's going to be way harder to actually do it.
Absolutely. Abusers, they can be really skilled manipulators. They know exactly how to prey on your vulnerabilities, your empathy, that desire to help.
It's like you want to believe you can save someone,
Yeah.
that your love is strong enough to fix them.
And that's such a powerful feeling, right? You probably do have a lot of love for that person, maybe even a belief that you can fix things. But the truth is, you can't change someone if they don't want to change themselves.
And it's definitely not worth risking your own safety or your kid's safety to try. That comment we talked about earlier about, imagine if he went apeshit and stuck the knife in your neck. That really hits home the danger here.
It's a chilling reminder, isn't it? It reminds you that sometimes you have to put survival first. It challenges that whole idea that love is always enough.
Yeah, so many people who are going through abuse feel like it's their fault,
Right.
like they somehow brought it on themselves. But the Redditors are shutting that down. They're
Yeah.
saying, no, it's not your fault. You don't have to fix this person.
It's like they're lifting a huge weight off her shoulders. This isn't your burden to bear. You deserve to be safe. You have a right to protect yourself, protect your kids.
And what's cool is they're not just saying, get out. They're actually offering ways to do it safely, like documenting the abuse, getting evidence together, even talking to a lawyer.
It's like they're giving her a roadmap, step-by-step instructions for escaping.
And a lot of those comments talk about how important it is to cut off all contact, block him on social media, resist that urge to go back or re-engage.
Healing from abuse takes time and space. It's about getting that breathing room, reclaiming your own sense of who you are, and building a life on your own terms.
It's more than just physically leaving, right? It's about escaping that mental and emotional hold that the abuser has over you.
For sure. And that's where therapy can be so helpful. Lots of those comments were recommending therapy, support groups, those domestic violence hotlines. They're recognizing that she doesn't have to go through this alone. There are people out there who can help.
And I think that's so important for anyone listening who might be in a similar situation. If you're feeling trapped, afraid, doubting yourself, please reach out for help. Seriously, you are not alone in this.
You deserve to be safe, no matter what.
Absolutely. One thing that really struck me about those Reddit responses was how many people shared their own stories, like, hey, I've been there too. It created this feeling that even though it's tough, other people have walked that path and made it through.
It's so powerful to hear that, right? It gives you hope. It says, I survive, you can too.
And speaking of hope, we have to talk about the kids in all of this. So many of the people commenting expressed concern about the kids witnessing this toxic stuff.
It's a reminder that kids are like sponges. They absorb everything. They see what's happening between the adults around them. And being exposed to abuse like this can have a lasting impact.
It's easy to think, oh, they're young, they won't remember. But those experiences can really mess with their development, their sense of safety, their future relationships, everything.
It's so true. They're not just watching passively. They're internalizing those patterns. It's like they're learning that love equals chaos, that relationships mean walking on eggshells. It can really warp their sense of self-worth and what they expect from other people.
And that's why it's not selfish to put your safety and your kids' safety first. It's actually an act of love.
You're breaking that cycle of dysfunction and creating a healthier environment for everyone to grow.
You know, some of those Reddit comments really threw me off. Like one said, give him a bigger knife, pack all your stuff, and leave ASAP. I mean, that sounds so harsh.
Yeah, that's a tough one. It doesn't exactly scream empathy, does it? But I think it speaks to how frustrated people get when they see someone stuck in a dangerous situation. It's like they're trying to shake her awake, make her see how serious this is.
So it's less about being mean and more about a wake-up call. Don't waste time trying to fix this guy. Just get out.
Yeah, like a slap in the face to snap her out of it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need that.
It's interesting, too, how everyone had such different advice. Some were all about practical tips. Others shared their own stories. Some were even talking about legal stuff.
That's what's so cool about a platform like Reddit, right? You get this incredible mix of viewpoints, all these different life experiences.
It's like crowdsourcing wisdom, but from a really unfiltered source.
Exactly. And for someone who's feeling totally lost, like the original poster, that can be really empowering. It shows them that they're not the only one, that other people have faced this and found ways to survive, even thrive.
Yeah, that sense of community really shines through. Even with those blunt comments, it's like they're all saying, we see you, we get it, and we're here to help you get out of this.
It's like a lifeline, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's a message we want to echo here at Voices of the Soul. For anyone listening who might be going through similar challenges, please remember you are not alone. There are resources out there, people who care, and a path towards a brighter future.
And you'll have to do it alone.
Never. And if you're looking for more support, more info, don't forget we've got links to resources on our website. And if you're looking for even deeper conversations about this kind of stuff, relationships, emotional well-being, you should check out Shauna Pelage's YouTube channel. She's amazing at breaking down complex topics in a way that's relatable and helpful.
Okay, so we've talked about abuse and all that, but there's this other aspect of the Reddit post I think is worth exploring, and it came up in the comments too. Codependency. I feel like that's relevant to a lot of relationships, not just abusive ones.
Yeah, codependency. That's a tricky one. It often starts with good intentions. You want to help someone you love, but it can quickly become unhealthy. You start sacrificing your own needs, your well-being, just to take care of the other person.
And in this situation, I can see how the original poster, staying with her fiancé, even after the threats and the self-harm, that could be a sign of codependency, right?
Yeah, she's so focused on rescuing him, fixing his problems, that she's losing sight of her own boundaries, her own safety.
And that's where it gets dangerous. You can't help anyone else if you're running on empty yourself.
Exactly. Codependency, it can really drain you emotionally and physically. You can burn out, start resenting the other person, even lose yourself in the process.
Like you forget who you are, what you want, all because you're so focused on the other person.
That's what makes it so important to talk about this stuff, to raise awareness. Because a lot of times people don't even realize they're caught in that codependent dynamic.
So what if someone's listening and thinking, wait, is that me? Like, what are some red flags to watch out for?
One big sign is that feeling of responsibility for other people's emotions, for how they're doing.
Yeah.
Like you take on their problems as your own and feel guilty if you can't fix everything.
It's like that whole people-pleasing thing, but times 10.
Totally. And it usually comes from being afraid of rejection, of being abandoned.
So you're so terrified of losing the relationship that you'll put up with almost anything, even if it's hurting you.
Right. And another thing is trouble setting boundaries. You might say yes when you really want to say no, or go along with stuff that makes you uncomfortable just to avoid upsetting the other person.
So you're always putting their needs before your own, even if it means compromising your own values or happiness.
Exactly. And that can lead to so much resentment and frustration later on.
It's not sustainable.
Not at all. That's why it's so important to talk about codependency. It's often this hidden dynamic that people don't even realize they're in.
So if someone's realizing, hey, maybe this is me, what's the first step?
Just acknowledging it, admitting to yourself that there might be a problem. Honestly, that's often the toughest part.
It's like you have to break through all the denial.
Yeah,
Admit that things aren't as healthy as you might have convinced yourself they were.
right. Once you've done that, then it's about getting some support, maybe talking to a therapist, joining a support group, even just opening up to a trusted friend or family member.
And remember, there's nothing wrong with getting help. It's a sign of strength, not weakness.
For sure. It's about taking care of yourself, putting your own well-being first. And that's something we talk about a lot here on Voices of the Soul, finding that balance between giving and receiving, setting healthy boundaries, and learning to love yourself as much as you love others.
And speaking of loving yourself, I keep coming back to that emotional roller coaster the original poster must be going through. All that fear, guilt, confusion, compassion, anger. It's like a whirlwind.
It's totally normal to feel that way in a situation like this. Trauma can really mess with your emotions.
Instead of trying to push those emotions away, it's important to just acknowledge them. Validate how you're feeling.
Yeah, emotions are like messengers. They're trying to tell us something. And if we ignore them, they just get louder and louder until we finally pay attention.
And in this case, those emotions are telling the original poster that something is wrong, that she's in a dangerous situation and needs to get out, protect herself, protect her kids.
They're a wake-up call.
But those emotions are so intense, it must be hard to even think straight when you're feeling so conflicted.
That's where self-compassion is so important. It's about being kind to yourself, recognizing that you're doing the best you can in a really difficult situation.
It's about accepting that you're human, that you make mistakes, you deserve love and forgiveness, even from yourself.
Exactly. And give yourself permission to feel your emotions, whatever they are, without judging yourself.
It's so easy to fall into that trap of self-blame, especially when you're dealing with abuse. But you're not alone. There are people out there who care about you, who want to help.
If you're having a hard time being kind to yourself, reach out to someone you trust, a therapist, a friend, a family member.
And remember, there are online resources too. If you're feeling overwhelmed, there are helplines, support groups, websites that are specifically designed to help people in these situations.
You don't have to go through this alone. There's support out there.
We've been talking about a lot of different things here, but there's one aspect of the situation that I think is often overlooked, and that's financial abuse.
Ah, yeah. Financial abuse. It's a subtle form of control, but it can be so insidious. It's basically when one partner tries to restrict the other's access to money or resources, making them dependent.
It can look like a lot of different things, right? Maybe controlling the finances, preventing them from working, even racking up debt in their partner's name.
Exactly. It's all about isolating the victim, making them feel trapped and powerless.
And it can make it so much harder to leave an abusive relationship if you don't have the financial means to support yourself, support your kids.
It's a trap, plain and simple.
If you're experiencing financial abuse, it's so important to reach out for help.
Absolutely. There are organizations that can offer financial assistance, legal advice, and help with safety planning.
You can also talk to a trusted friend or family member or call a domestic violence hotline. There are people who want to help you get back on your feet.
Remember, you're not alone in this.
And I think it's important for all of us to be aware of this kind of dynamic. We need to educate ourselves about the different forms abuse can take so we can support the people in our lives who might be going through this.
It's about creating a culture where abuse is not tolerated, a culture where survivors feel safe to speak up and get the help they need.
And that starts with having these conversations, breaking down the stigma, teaching people about healthy relationships and the warning signs.
For sure. We need more funding for domestic violence shelters and support services. We need to train law enforcement and healthcare professionals about how to respond effectively to victims.
It's about creating a system that actually works, a system of support that's accessible, compassionate, and gets results.
And it's about holding abusers accountable. That means enforcing laws, offering treatment and rehab programs, and creating a culture where this kind of behavior is simply unacceptable.
We got to send a clear message that abuse is never okay. There are consequences.
And we need to empower survivors to take back their lives, to heal and thrive.
That's a powerful vision. I think we can all work towards that.
I think so too. If you're listening and feeling inspired to take action, there are so many ways to get involved. You can volunteer at a local shelter, donate to an organization, or just speak out against abuse whenever you see it happening.
Even those little things can add up to make a big difference.
Every voice counts. Every action matters.
Okay, before we wrap up this part, I want to go back to something from the Reddit post that really struck me. There was a lot of anger directed at the fiancé. Yeah, but also a lot of empathy for both him and the original poster.
I noticed that too. Even with all the outrage, people were acknowledging that this is a complicated situation.
Some people were even speculating about the fiancé's motivations. Like, could he be dealing with depression, anxiety, maybe even a personality disorder?
It's important to remember that those are just guesses, right? We can't diagnose someone based on a Reddit post.
Of course not. But it does raise a good point. Abuse often stems from deeper issues.
It's rarely about the victim. It's about the abuser's own struggles and their inability to cope in healthy ways.
That's why it's so important to address those root causes of abuse instead of just focusing on the symptoms.
Right. Therapy, medication, support groups, those can all help people break free from those destructive patterns and learn how to have healthier relationships.
It's about recognizing that even abusers are human beings. They often have their own pain and trauma.
That doesn't excuse what they do, but it can help us approach these situations with a little more compassion.
It doesn't mean condoning the behavior, but it means recognizing the humanity of everyone involved.
Exactly. And it's about creating a space for healing, both for the victims and for those who've caused harm.
It's like acknowledging that we're all capable of both hurting and being hurt, and that we all deserve a chance at redemption, at growth.
That's such a powerful message, and it's at the heart of what we do here at Voices of the Soul. It's about fostering empathy, compassion, understanding, even when things are tough.
And if you're struggling with any of this, remember that you are not alone. Seriously, there are resources, people who care, and a path towards healing.
You deserve to feel safe, respected, and loved. We're here to support you on that journey.
And if you're feeling inspired to explore these topics even further, definitely check out Shauna Pelage's YouTube channel.
She's got so much wisdom to share and practical guidance that can help you navigate those tricky parts of life and build stronger, healthier relationships.
We'll be back for part 3 of this deep dive soon. We'll keep unpacking all the layers of this Reddit post and talk about some more concrete strategies for building healthy relationships.
And in the meantime, leave a comment below and tell us what you think. Share your experiences, any resources you found helpful. Let's keep this conversation going.
We'll see you back here soon. Welcome back to the deep dive. This Reddit post has really been something, hasn't it? We've gone through so much. Relationships, manipulation, how to get out of those bad patterns. It's been quite a ride.
It's crazy how one story can spark so many different conversations. And what's really hit me is how many people commented on that post. Hundreds. A lot of them sharing their own stories, struggles, things they've learned. It shows you how universal this stuff really is.
It's like this huge group of people saying, we've been there too. This is serious. You deserve better. And you see so many different ways of coping. Some dark humor, some fierce protectiveness, practical advice, people sharing their own experiences.
That's one of the things I find so fascinating about these online spaces. You get to see the human experience, all these different perspectives and ways people deal with things. It reminds you that there's no one right way to handle these situations, but we can learn a lot from each other.
One thing I keep coming back to is personal responsibility. Where does the original poster's responsibility end and her fiancé's begin? It can be so hard to figure that out, especially when you've got codependency and manipulation in the mix.
I hear that question a lot. And it's tough. It's natural to want to help the people we love. We want to believe we can fix them or rescue them.
It's so easy to get caught up in that thinking, if they just loved me enough, they would change.
But the truth is, we're each responsible for our own choices, our own actions. You can't make someone get help if they're not ready. And you can't carry their burdens for them. Someone in those comments said it perfectly. You can't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm.
Wow. That's such a powerful image. And it speaks to that idea of self-preservation. Your well-being is just as important as anyone else's.
It's not selfish to prioritize your own safety and your mental health. It's essential.
And, sometimes setting that example for yourself is what inspires the other person to finally get help. But you can't do it for them. I remember those comments that were so direct about how to respond to the self-harm. One person said, if he's going to cut himself, that's 100% on him. It's a manipulation tactic. Don't let him get away with it.
It's tough love, but it's true. You're not responsible for someone else's actions, even if they try to make you feel that way. You got to see the manipulation for what it is and just refuse to play that game.
Someone else said, call 911. When the ambulance and police get there and he's facing a psych hold, he'll stop.
That's a good point. Sometimes you need to get professionals involved, especially when someone is a danger to themselves or others. It's not about punishing them, it's about getting them help.
It's a tricky balance though, right? You don't want to enable the behavior or reward the manipulation.
Absolutely. It's all about setting those clear boundaries, having consequences that you stick to. You can say, I love you, but I won't put up with this. If you hurt yourself, I'll call for help, but I'm not staying.
We've talked about so much in this deep dive. It feels like we've only just scratched the surface. What are some of the main things you hope listeners are taking away from all of this?
The most important thing is to recognize those patterns of abuse, verbal threats, emotional manipulation, using self-harm to control you. Those are huge red flags. You can't ignore them.
And knowing that you're not responsible for someone else's choices. You can support them, but you can't change them.
Right. You're only responsible for yourself. And knowing that there's help out there, whether it's a hotline, a therapist, a friend, a family member, you don't have to go through this alone.
If you're listening and thinking, this sounds like me, please reach out for help. Don't be ashamed. Taking that first step is so brave, it can change your whole life.
We can't say that enough. You deserve to be safe. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to be free.
This deep dive has been heavy, but so important. I hope it's gotten people talking, thinking about these issues.
If you want to learn more, we have tons of resources on our website. Links to hotlines, support groups, educational materials. It's all there for you.
And if you're ready to go even deeper, check out Shauna Pelage's YouTube channel. She's amazing.
She really is. She's got so much wisdom and practical advice on how to build better relationships and live a more authentic life.
That's a great reminder for all of us. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Remember, knowledge is power. And even when things are tough, there's always hope.
Always. And for those of you who found this helpful, please subscribe to Voices of the Soul and share it with someone who might need it. Talking about these issues is how we break the stigma and make space for healing and change.
That's what it's all about. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep listening for those voices of the soul that guide us toward a brighter tomorrow.